At a press conference held on last Thursday in Los Angeles, it was announced that Matthew Perry was murdered and did not die of natural causes. Matthew was targeted for indirect murder after being financially exploited. 5 individuals have been accused in the murder of Matthew. So who are these 5 people? They are his personal assistant Kenneth Iwamasa, who is 59 years old, Dr. Mark Chavez, who is 42 years old, Dr. Salvador Plasencia, who is 54 years old, a woman named Jasvine Sangha, who is 41 years old, and Director Eric Fleming, who is 54 years old. If you remember, at the time of Matthew's death, all statements said that the cause of death was an accidental drowning. However, when the doctors conducted an autopsy, they discovered that there was a large amount of ketamine in his blood. Matthew was taking ketamine at the time to combat depression, but there were suspicions at that time that he might have increased the prescribed dosage in an attempt to take his own life. Ketamine is a sedative used in low doses to alleviate severe treatment-resistant depression. An overdose of it, of course, leads to slow death due to symptoms such as high blood pressure, seizures, arrhythmia, and respiratory arrest. Investigations into the cause of Matthew's death continued for a long time after his death to determine why these substances were in his body in such quantities. Ultimately, it was discovered that all these individuals mentioned were responsible for Matthew's addiction to the drug in unpermitted doses, and were virtually part of a wide criminal network supplying ketamine. They exploited Matthew's issues with addiction and depression to achieve financial gains at the expense of his health and life. We begin with the first person, which is Matthew's personal guard, Kenneth Iwamasa. Kenneth had relationships with 3 individuals, Director Eric and Doctors Salvador and Mark, all of whom were involved in this crime. These individuals periodically provided him with ketamine in exchange for a financial reward exceeding $50,000, which he funded from Matthew's money. As Matthew's personal assistant and guard, Kenneth was one of the closest people to Matthew, to the extent that Matthew lived at his house for over a month before his death. Because he was close to him, he was responsible for Matthew's medications and was able to inject him with no less than 27 doses of ketamine, the last of which was administered before he entered the jacuzzi and passed away. Imagine that Kenneth had been Matthew's guard from 1994 until 2023, which means for 29 years, and in the end, he betrayed him and exploited his illness to take money from him. After his arrest, he acknowledged and confessed to being guilty of the charge of conspiracy to administer ketamine to Matthew and admitted that he injected Matthew without medical training, and it is expected that he will be sentenced to 15 years in prison. The second 2 accused individuals, Doctors Salvador Plasencia and Mark Chavez, exploited Matthew's need for treatment and sold him 20 containers over a 2-month period before his death for $55,000. As doctors, they were aware of the risks of the drug, but they did not care about Matthew's health and exploited the situation for their own benefit. After investigations, it was discovered that there were text messages between them discussing the quantity and number of medications for Matthew, in which Dr. Salvador expressed, in one of the messages, "How much will this fool pay?" referring to Matthew. When arrested, he was charged with conspiracy to distribute ketamine and 7 other charges related to ketamine distribution, as well as 2 charges for altering and forging documents and records related to the federal investigation in his favor. When he appeared in court, he insisted that he was not guilty, despite the evidence against him. He is expected to face a 10-year sentence for the charges related to ketamine and 20 years for document forgery. The second doctor, Mark Chavez, after being arrested, admitted to what he did and was charged with only 1 count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine, from which he is expected to face a 10-year prison sentence. The third accused person is Director Eric Fleming, who is said to have been a very close friend of Matthew. Unfortunately, he was also sending Matthew's personal guard more than 50 vials of ketamine, the last shipment of which was delivered 4 days before Matthew's death. He is expected to receive a 25-year sentence. So, everyone was exploiting this side of him, trading ketamine to him because he was treating himself with it for depression, until they led him to become addicted to it in large doses, exploiting him for their financial interests. The fifth person accused of killing Matthew is Jasvine Sangha, now known as the Queen of Ketamine. Jasvine is a British-American woman known for a long time to be selling various types of drugs and only dealing with the wealthy and celebrities. Police learned of her involvement in funding ketamine and raided her home. When the police reached her residence in California, they found over 80 vials of ketamine and thousands of drug pills of various types and in large quantities. The district attorney in California stated that Jasvine's home was effectively a store for selling all types of drugs. The indictment stated that on October 24, 2023, she sold a large quantity of ketamine to director Eric Fleming, who then provided this drug to Matthew, ultimately causing his death that same month. After being arrested, she was charged with conspiracy to distribute and sell ketamine, maintaining drug-related workplaces, and possession and trafficking of narcotics. It is expected that she will receive a prison sentence ranging from 10 years to life. So far, no final sentences have been issued against them, but all 5 individuals have been arrested. Charges against them have been established, and they are implicated in arranging a scheme to addict Matthew to ketamine and exploiting him until they caused his death.